He never imagined that one small act of kindness could change the entire course of his life, but sometimes destiny hides behind ragged coats and tired eyes, waiting for the moment when compassion unlocks its greatest secrets. And today, dear viewers, we step into the life of a struggling single father named Daniel, a man whose heart was bigger than his wallet, whose dreams had been crushed beneath the heavy weight of bills, fatherhood, and loneliness, yet whose spirit still flickered like a candle fighting the wind. Daniel was 35, worn from long nights at the diner where he worked as a short-order cook, greasy apron tied tightly around his waist as he flipped burgers and fried eggs for strangers who barely looked at him, all while trying to keep his 7-year-old daughter, Lily, fed, clothed, and smiling despite the storm clouds of hardship that always hovered over their tiny one-bedroom apartment his wife had left years ago, unable to bear the financial struggles, leaving Daniel not only to carry the debt but also the broken pieces of his heart, though he never let Lily see his pain, because for her he forced his tired lips to curl into a smile each morning, whispering promises that tomorrow would be better, even if he wasn't sure how. And then came the night that would change everything, a night colder than most, when Daniel left the diner after a long shift, the tips in his pocket barely enough to cover rent, his breath forming white clouds in the air, and as he walked down the alley shortcut to the bus stop, he saw Kira huddled against the wall, wrapped in a blanket that looked more like tattered fabric than warmth, her hair messy, her hands trembling, her eyes cast downward as if she wanted to disappear into the cracks of the sidewalk. And Daniel, exhausted as he was, stopped, because something in him would not allow him to walk past suffering. Something in him whispered that maybe she had a story too, a story as broken as his own. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, and she lifted her head, revealing eyes that shimmered with both shame and gratitude, a voice quiet and fragile as she replied, "I'll be fine, a broken bar, you don't need to worry about me." But Daniel did worry, because that was who he was, so without overthinking he shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, feeling the sting of cold bite into his own arms but refusing to let her shiver, and when she tried to protest, he simply said, "Please, keep it, I've got a little girl waiting for me at home, and I want her to know her daddy did the right thing tonight." Words that surprised even him, but they poured from his heart, and in that moment something invisible tied them together, though neither of them knew just how deep that thread would weave into their lives. Her name, she finally whispered, was Anna, and though she offered no details about how she had ended up on the streets, Daniel didn't press, because dignity was all she had left, and instead he bought her a sandwich from the corner store with the last few dollars in his wallet, watching as she ate slowly, as if savoring not just the food but the fact that someone had seen her, truly seen her, in a world that usually turned its head days past. And every time Daniel walked home, he noticed Anna in the same spot, sometimes awake, sometimes curled up asleep, and though he barely had enough for himself and Lily, he began bringing her leftovers from the diner, even small things like coffee in a paper cup, and Lily, with the innocent curiosity of a child, asked one night, "Daddy, why do you always bring food for someone else?" And Daniel knelt down, looked into her wide eyes, and said, "Because we never know when we might be the one needing help, sweetheart. Kindness is something we can always afford." And Lily, wise beyond her years, nodded with a smile, as if she understood more than her father realized. Slowly, Anna began to open up, sharing little pieces of her story, how she had no family, how she had once lived a very different life but lost everything in circumstances she couldn't quite explain, her words vague yet tinged with sorrow, and Daniel never pushed for more, because trust was not built overnight, and he was simply content knowing he could give her some warmth in a world that had turned so cold. Weeks turned into months, and soon it became part of his routine: work, care for Lily, and check on Anna, who began smiling more each day, her eyes brighter, as if hope was slowly crawling back into her soul. And though Daniel didn't know it, Anna was watching him just as closely, noticing how he worked himself to the bone yet never complained, how he tucked Lily's hair behind her ear when he thought no one was looking, how he gave away the little he had without expecting anything in return, and deep inside her heart, something was awakening, something she hadn't felt in years. What Daniel could not have known, what none of us would have guessed, was that Anna was no ordinary homeless woman. She was a billionaire in hiding, a woman who had chosen to vanish from her high-rise world of glass towers and endless wealth, disillusioned by betrayal, greed, and loneliness, testing the true heart of humanity by living among those who had nothing. And Daniel, unknowingly, was becoming the very proof she had been searching for. But dear viewers, the story is just beginning, because as Daniel continued to fight his battle as a rent overdue, Lily's school fees piling up, his body growing weaker from exhaustion, he still found it in him to give, and Anna, silently, was falling not only for his kindness but for the man himself, though she dared not reveal her truth just yet, afraid he would treat her differently, afraid to lose the genuine love she saw in his eyes, the love he gave without price. The nights grew colder, the struggles heavier, and Daniel's landlord threatened eviction, his boss cut back his hours, and yet he still chose to feed Anna before himself. And in one unforgettable moment, as rain poured down one night and Daniel found Anna shivering beneath a soaked blanket, he lifted her up, brought her to his tiny apartment, and introduced her to Lily with the words, "This is my friend Anna, and she needs a place to stay tonight." Words that would echo in Anna's heart forever, because no one had called her friend in so long. Lily giggled, offered Anna a seat at their wobbly kitchen table, and they shared soup together, three souls bound not by blood but by kindness, laughter echoing faintly against the peeling walls of a small apartment that suddenly felt rich with love. And though Daniel didn't know it, he was giving Anna more than shelter. He was giving her a home, something Daniel never realized, that letting Anna stay in his small apartment would become the turning point of his entire life, because what started as a single night of shelter turned into days, and days into weeks, as the bond between them deepened, not in the way of convenience or obligation, but in the way souls recognize one another in the silence between words. And though his home was modest, with second-hand furniture and a fridge that often hummed louder than it was full, it was rich with warmth, laughter, and the innocence of Lily's giggles that spilled through the rooms like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. And Anna, once a stranger and rags, was now a part of that fragile but beautiful rhythm. Every morning she would help Lily with her homework while Daniel dragged his weary body to another double shift. Every evening she would cook simple meals out of whatever scraps he could afford, surprising him with flavors that reminded him of a life he thought he had lost. And late at night, when Lily was asleep, Daniel and Anna would sit at the kitchen table sipping tea, their conversations stretching from the small tragedies of life to the quiet hopes they both carried deep inside. And though she never revealed the truth of who she really was, Anna felt herself falling more deeply in love with the man who had seen her not as a burden or a project, but as a human being worthy of dignity and respect. Daniel, for his part, tried to push away the feelings stirring in his chest, telling himself she deserved someone better, someone stronger, someone who could offer more than overdue bills and a pair of tired hands. Yet every time he caught her smiling at Lily, every time she looked at him with eyes full of admiration, he felt a spark of something he thought he would never feel again after his wife had left. A hope. But as with all stories of love, life tested them, because Daniel's financial troubles grew heavier by the day, his landlord impatient, his job hours cut, and the burden of keeping a roof over their heads nearly breaking him. Yet still, he refused to give up. Still he walked through life with quiet determination, and Anna, silently, was moved beyond words, because she had known men who wielded power and wealth, but never one who wielded such strength of heart. In the face of so little, she longed to tell him the truth, to reveal that the woman he thought was homeless was in fact an heiress, a self-made billionaire who had built and lost empires, only to step away from the hollow world of luxury to rediscover what truly mattered. But fear chained her tongue, for she knew the moment he discovered her wealth, everything could change. Would he still look at her the same way? Would his kindness still be pure, or would it be tainted by the knowledge of what she could give him? So she waited, testing, hoping, and watching as the days went by, until the night that fate forced her hand. Daniel came home one evening, drenched from rain, shoulders slumped, a rare defeat in his eyes as he told Anna and Lily that he might not be able to pay rent, that the landlord was giving them only a week before eviction, and for the first time, Anna saw him cry not loud sobs, but silent tears of a man who had carried too much for too long, a man who was breaking not for himself but for the little girl asleep in the next room, and something inside her shattered, because she could no longer stand by and watch the man she loved crumble under the weight of a struggle he should never have faced alone that night. When Daniel finally drifted into exhausted sleep on the couch, Anna sat awake, staring at the peeling paint on the walls, her heart pounding with the decision she knew she must make, and by morning, she had vanished not into the streets, but into the world she had left behind, a world of glass offices, sleek cars, and bank accounts that could buy entire neighborhoods, because Anna was ready now, ready to bring her two worlds together. Daniel panicked when he discovered she was gone, his heart aching in a way he hadn't expected, because somewhere deep down, he knew he didn't just want Anna as a guest or a friend, he wanted her by his side. Yet he convinced himself she had left for good, that maybe he had only been a temporary chapter in her broken story, and the thought nearly crushed him. But 3 days later, everything changed. There was a knock at his door, not the harsh pounding of the landlord, but a gentle knock that carried both fear and hope, and when Danielle opened the door, there stood Anna, no longer in tattered clothes but in a tailored dress, her hair shining, her posture regal, surrounded by men in suits who stood respectfully behind her, and Daniel froze, confusion flickering in his eyes as Lily ran forward. "Yvonne,"